All right, so we are back with another session of Crime in Congress.
Woohoo.
How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm actually doing pretty good. I did sleep well last night.
Oh, jealous.
Yeah, I hear you did not sleep well.
No, I don't know why. I felt like I was just like barely asleep all night. And then this morning I woke up kind of anxious, and so I'm like trying not to really have caffeine, but I'm dragging. And it's just kind of a perfect storm, honestly.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I'll think I sleep really good, and then I'll look at my Oura Ring score and like it's not as good as I think, and it kind of makes me sad, you know. And then I'm like, wow, should I feel more tired?
Forrest has this app that he uses to like track his sleep, but he doesn't have like a ring or anything for it. So it just goes off of sound. And I am convinced that it picks up both of us.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, it knows just to pick up me. And so he'll have what he thinks is a good night's sleep, but then he'll get a super low sleep score. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably because I was moving at times where you weren't moving. Yeah. So it just thought everything was you. And he's like, no, it only tracks me.
No, I think it's tracking both of you.
I think it's tracking both of us. So I think he only gets a high sleep score when we're both like sleeping on the same cycle. Like we're both a little bit awake at the same time and in REM at the same time.
Exactly.
Or he even said
how does it only know? How does it only know? Come on now.
He never trained it. He just downloaded it on his phone. So I'm just like, maybe not. And he'll say like, every now and then when I'm out and he's sleeping by himself, he's like, oh, I had a great sleep score last night. I'm like, yeah, probably because it was only tracking you.
That's when it is only tracking you.
Yes, it also, and I hate this feature, it records sounds made during the night.
Oh, I've seen one of those. Yeah.
And so he like wakes up in the morning and starts playing it and like blames me for every little like snore and snort. And I'm just like, hold on. So this app only tracks you, but it's picking my noises.
Interesting. Seems like we defeated the own argument there.
Yeah,
but.
It's my least favorite like habit of his because I just hate listening to all of like the little mumblings in my sleep.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, no one needs to hear any of that.
No. And it's his favorite.
That's none of my business. That's none of my business.
Exactly.
What I say in my sleep is none of my business.
So I need to find a way to, maybe I need to get him an Oura Ring so he can move away from this app.
Yeah. That might be a good investment.
Yeah. He also doesn't usually wear his wedding ring. He wears like the silicone ones. Mm-hmm. So I've thought about getting him an Oura Ring so that he has like a slightly nicer like wedding-ish
You can't wear
ring.
it on that finger though.
Oh, you can't?
Yeah, it's only supposed to be the two.
Oh, okay, so that wouldn't work.
Yeah, but like mine, when I tried to, sorry guys, I'm sure you want to hear about this. When I first set it up, it wouldn't get my pulse on this one, so I had to be on my like pointer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then never mind. He gets to stick with his silicone rings.
Anyways.
All right, so Sarah, are you ready to take a quick trip back to middle school history class with me?
I sure am.
Today we're discussing the caning of Charles Sumner by Representative Preston Brooks, an event credited with stoking the flames that would eventually lead to the Civil War. Ever heard of it?
I have.
She's Sarah.
She's Harley. And we're gaveling in another session of Crime in Congress.
It was a steamy 90 degrees in the old Senate chamber on May 19th, 1856, where freshman senator from Massachusetts, Charles Sumner, was waiting to speak. Standing at a respectable 6'2", by some accounts he was 6'4", he was known for his interesting clothing, often seen in a light-colored English tweed coat and lavender pants, his stellar oratory, and his equally stellar physique. Thought that was important to mention.
Yeah, okay, style.
Yeah, wanted that documented. He was fine. Around 1 p.m., Sumner rose to speak. This speech had been a long time coming, as he'd been trying to get floor time scheduled for 2 months. It's not nearly that hard to get floor time scheduled nowadays, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? The subject of his speech was one of the most contentious issues in Washington at the time. Whether Kansas should be a free state or a slave state. This shouldn't have been an issue at all because in 1820, the Missouri Compromise outlawed slavery north of the 30-degree latitude line, which is essentially anything north of the southernmost border of Missouri, with the exception of the state of Missouri itself. Hence the name Missouri Compromise.
Deals are so silly.
Yeah. But that deal was basically out the window because in May 1854, about 2 years before the day of this speech, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was signed into law. This would allow both Kansas and Nebraska to join the United States as territories and let the residents of each territory vote on whether to allow slavery. It was generally believed that Nebraska would reject slavery and Kansas would allow it, thereby maintaining a balance of power between the northern and southern states. This agreement, led by Democratic Senator Stephen A. Douglas, who comes back up, so keep him in mind, was drafted to appease the southern states. Basically, the South didn't want to let 2 free states join the Union because it would give the North the balance of power and threaten the legality of slavery nationwide. This bill was passed by the 33rd Congress and signed into law by President Pierce, who was a Northerner with a soft spot for the South. He actually got the nickname Doughface because his views on key issues like slavery were easily molded by the South.
Doughface.
Tough nickname.
I'm not okay with that. I would not be okay with that.
No, especially not have it like documented in history books. But things didn't exactly go according to plan. To quote History and Stories of Nebraska by Addison Sheldon, in Nebraska, the people never voted for slavery, but people coming here from the South brought slaves with them. In 1855, there were 13 slaves in Nebraska, and in 1860, there were 10. Most of these were held in Nebraska City. The issue of slavery was debated in the territorial legislature beginning in 1854, but mainly stayed there, in the political arena. By today's standards, Nebraska would be considered a slave territory, but at the time, it was described as being, quote, tempered with tolerance for African Americans, and part of the Underground Railroad also ran through Nebraska. Kansas, on the other hand, was a different story altogether. Instead of battling the issue of slavery out at the ballot box, these settlers chose violence, literally. In what you might be able to consider the first true political battleground state, both pro- and anti-slavery factions settled in the territory, which developed into a state-level civil war beginning in 1854. This period of time, from 1854 to 1859, was known as Bleeding Kansas and was considered the prelude to the actual Civil War. It's kind of like where they fought the issue out before it went to the whole nation.
Got it. Okay.
Kansas was about as divided as it gets. It had 2 governing bodies, 2 capital cities, and 2 constitutions, one set of each that opposed slavery and one set of each that embraced it. By the spring or summer of 1856, violence and tensions in Kansas had reached a fever pitch, and it only seemed to be escalating. It was under this umbrella of events that Sumner, an anti-slavery member of the emerging Republican Party, ever heard of it, rose to speak. Charles Sumner was a wee bit of a political nepo baby, but not to an extreme extent. His father, a Harvard-educated lawyer, served as clerk to the Massachusetts House of Representatives and was an anti-slavery advocate, which was a wild thing to be when his son, Charles Sumner, was born in Boston in 1811. The younger Sumner was raised to abhor slavery and was even taught that freedom wasn't enough. Freed slaves needed to be treated as equals. The bar was quite literally on the floor in the 19th century, but at least there were people like the Sumners who were able to trip over it.
Right.
Sumner followed in his father's and Elwood's footsteps, attending Harvard School of Law.
Nice.
Sumner's political career began in 1845, where he became known as a leading anti-slavery crusader in Boston. He would actually reject a nomination by the Whig Party to the House of Representatives in 1848, choosing instead to start the Free Soil political party. This was a group of anti-slavery Democrats, which would eventually merge with the Republican Party.
Interesting.
Put simply, Sumner was a radical, a Bernie Sanders of his time, if you will. His nomination to the U.S. Senate was contentious, but on April 24th, 1851, Sumner was elected to serve as Massachusetts senator by a 1-vote margin.
1 vote?
Yes, but remember, senators were not directly elected until 1912.
Okay.
So
that
not
makes more sense.
actually that crazy.
Okay.
Needless to say, this radical had few friends in the Senate. Despite holding off for a few sessions before embracing what would be considered more fringe causes, he kind of eased into it a little bit, but he wasn't Mr. Popular in Washington, D.C. On this day, with his 112-page, fully memorized speech, he used those 2 months well. Sumner wasn't ready to just rock the boat. He wanted to blow it to smithereens.
Wow. People don't do floor speeches like that anymore.
No, they don't. Over the course of 2 days and 5 hours,
Wow.
a speech like this could literally never happen in the House of Representatives. Sumner delivered a scathing anti-slavery speech titled Crimes Against Kansas, where he targeted Senator Stephen A. Douglas, the Democrat from Illinois who wrote the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and Senator Andrew Butler, who was one of the only senators not present in the chamber that day. He hailed from South Carolina, was himself a slaveholder, and co-authored the Kansas-Nebraska Act with Douglas. So he was going after the bill's original sponsors.
Got it.
Before he dove into the meat of his speech, though, and he is so messy for this, Sumner decided to take shots at Douglas and Butler. He was like, I'm going to let myself finish, but first I got to talk about how much these guys suck.
Incredible.
Here are the highlights. The senator from South Carolina has read many books on chivalry and believes himself a chivalrous knight with sentiments of honor and courage. Of course he has chosen a mistress to whom he has made his vows, and who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean the harlot, slavery. For her, his tongue is always profuse in words. If the slave states cannot enjoy what in mockery of the great fathers of the Republic, he misnames equality under the Constitution. Then, sir, the chivalric senator will conduct the state of South Carolina out of the Union. Heroic knight, exalted senator, a second Moses come for a second Exodus.
Nice.
He is the uncompromising, unblushing representative on this floor of a flagrant sectionalism. I affirm that the Republican Party of the Union now goes forth to dislodge from the high places of the government the tyrannical sectionalism of which the senator from South Carolina is one of the maddest zealots. As the senator from South Carolina is a Don Quixote, the senator from Illinois, Mr. Douglas, is a squire of slavery. It's very Sancho Panza, ready to do all its humiliating offices. The senator copies the British officer who, with boastful swagger, said that with the hilt of his sword he would cram the stamps down the throats of the American people, and he will meet a similar failure.
Whew. Comparisons to the British officers too. That's he popped off with this one.
He really did. And this was just like the intro to his speech. Like,
yeah.
It wasn't even what he was there to talk about.
Yeah. He's like, and another thing.
And you can't see this obviously, but there's a bunch of dots in here because he went on and on and on. I had to pare this down. But he spared no words when it was talking about these two. His disdain was evident. But to translate all of this into 2025 speak, he's saying that Douglas and Butler were a bunch of cocky betas who hitched their wagons to racism and were too far up their own butts to see themselves the way the rest of the world sees them, which is, as, to use our favorite word here at Crime in Congress, buffoons.
Buffoons.
Buffoonery at its finest. He walked so Jasmine Crockett could run.
That's great.
This was a stunning speech in more ways than one, and it certainly upped the temperature in the already blistering hot Senate. But for a couple of days after the speech was delivered, nothing really happened. Sure, people talked, and sure, Sumner didn't exactly make any friends because of it, but it was just that, a speech. Until it became much, much more. Because in true House of Representatives fashion, a man named Preston Brooks saw this drama and decided it was time to make it about himself.
How can I make this about me?
Yeah, pretty much. Preston Brooks was a slaveholder from Edgefield, South Carolina. Born August 5th, 1819, to parents Whitfield Brooks and Mary Parsons Carroll Brooks, mouthful, he attended South Carolina College, where he gained a reputation for being both smart and unruly. Today, this is known as the University of South Carolina. He didn't actually graduate, though, because in true hothead fashion, just before graduation, like he had literally already taken his exams, he threatened a police officer with a pistol because of a rumor that they had treated his brother poorly.
Get your life together.
Right?
Like,
police were able to successfully de-escalate the situation, which is surprising, but it resulted in Brooks being expelled from the university.
That's crazy.
He literally was right there at the finish line and just fumbled.
Yep.
This hothead behavior would become a theme throughout Brooks's life, as would his propensity to defend not just his honor, but the honor of his loved ones. In 1840, though, he would pay dearly for this shortcoming. After a man named Louis Wigfall, I like to imagine that he got this last name because his wig fell off.
Yeah.
And like it just defined his family
Louis
for the rest
Wigfall,
of time.
Yeah.
He was actually a future senator from Texas. Shot and killed Thomas Byrd, who was either Brooks's nephew or cousin. I saw conflicting reporting on that.
Okay, sure.
And I mean, crazy that there's just like senators out there killing people and then getting elected.
No, right? Crazy.
This is the wild, wild west. But after this, he challenged Brooks' father to a duel. They kind of had like an exchange of words in the local paper where they were insulting each other, and it ended up with Brooks, or with Wigfall being like, you know what, I'm gonna duel you. But Brooks' dad was too old to fight, so Brooks stepped up in his place and replaced his father. In this exchange of bullets.
Okay, got it.
I'll have to do a deeper dive into Wigfall and this duel at some point because both are just crazy.
Absolutely.
Anyway, despite Lin-Manuel Miranda's claim that most disputes die and no one shoots, this dispute wasn't like the others, in the sense that someone did shoot, and Brooks was wounded because of it. This injury would force him to walk with a cane for the rest of his life.
Oh.
Little foreshadowing there.
Uh-huh.
Even though Brooks didn't graduate college, because of the 1800s of it all, he was still able to work as a lawyer before being elected to serve on the South Carolina legislature in 1844. Brooks would also serve as a captain of a volunteer regiment in the Mexican War, which I think is rather impressive for someone who walked with a cane.
Yeah, interesting.
After that, Brooks kind of returned to his plantation life, owning slaves and disowning any semblance of moral character, before splashing back onto the political scene in 1853, when he was elected to serve as a Democrat in the House of Representatives, representing his home state of South Carolina. He was a big proponent of states' rights, which at this time was synonymous with slavery.
Yep.
And was an acolyte of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Not only did he support the Kansas-Nebraska Act, not only was he a South Carolinian, not only was he a hothead and an avid proponent of slavery, but he was also first cousins once removed with Senator Butler.
Oh.
Who you'll remember was a target of Sumner's speech and, critically, was not present for the insult against him.
Okay, so he's taking this personally.
He is taking this personally.
I was wondering where we got from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a little bit more sense.
And so in the honor culture world that they're living in,
right,
everything that Sumner did was just like a big no-no.
Yeah.
You don't insult someone on the House floor when they're not present to like absorb the blows.
Right.
Mix all of that together, and what have you got? Trouble.
Yep.
Right here in Washington City, with a capital T and that rhymes with P and that stands for Preston.
Ooh, girl. Okay. Okay.
We really got to find a way to keep these members moral after session. If you didn't get that joke, pause right now and go watch The Music Man. Like right now.
Right
I
now.
mean it.
2 musical references in one episode. Harley, you're killing
This
it.
is a real crime in Congress. This is just everything.
It's
crime
an
in
old-fashioned
Congress.
crime in Congress, yeah.
It really is. So Brooks was incensed by this speech and wasn't going to let it go without some sort of response, gentlemanly or otherwise, no matter where he went in the city. For the 36 hours following the speech, the talk of the town was what could be done to avenge the state of South Carolina and the honor of the men blasted by this incendiary speech. Brooks's initial reaction was to challenge Sumner to a duel. But Mr. Keat, a fellow Democrat from South Carolina, shot that idea down.
Why? Because duels are stupid, or?
You know, that should be why. But no.
Oh.
If you listen to our episodes about the Silly Graves duel, you'll know that duels were fought between gentlemen. Keat argued that Sumner was no gentleman at all. Therefore, he actually wasn't qualified to duel Brooks.
Okay. Not what I was expecting.
Mm-hmm. It's take.
Yeah. Okay.
That's when the crew, which also included input from Henry A. Edmondson, a Democrat from Virginia, came up with an idea that was somehow worse than challenging the man to a duel. On May 22nd, after the Senate adjourned, Sumner was sitting at his desk, quietly franking envelopes so he could mail off his Crimes Against Kansas speech to constituents and minding his own business. For those of you who don't know, a frank is when members of Congress's signature can be used as a stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was just like signing it in lieu of a stamp so he could mail it out. That's when Edmondson, Keat, and Brooks entered the chamber. Initially, there wasn't much thought of this.
These are all House members, right?
All House
so
members.
they're walking into the Senate chambers. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, not that strange.
No. But this is okay. I still think it's good to remember that these are not other senators.
Yeah, House members. Brooks exchanged pleasantries with one Colonel Nicholson, and the two had this rather bizarre conversation. Sarah, because this is an old-fashioned Crime in Congress episode. Are you down for some role play?
Of course. Who do you want me to play?
You'll be Nicholson.
Okay. How's Colonel Brooks today?
Well, I thank you. Come here, Nicholson. Do you see that lady in the lobby?
Yes.
She has been out there for some time. What does she want? Can't you manage to get her out?
No, that would be ungallant. Besides, she's very pretty.
Yes, she is pretty, but I wish she would go. End of conversation.
Okay.
I think Brooks wanted to spare the, quote, pretty lady from the events that would play out next. But still a weird conversation.
Yeah.
I tried to ignore it and I couldn't. So
we just had to mention it. We had to, yeah.
Brooks approached Sumner, which surprised many in the room, given the speech that Sumner had just given days prior, and bent down to whisper something in his ear. Suddenly, Brooks rose his gold-tipped gutta-percha cane, the same material used for tooth fillings, high above his head, and brought it down swiftly, smacking the senator right over the head.
My gosh.
Sumner, trapped beneath the bolted-down desk, had blood gushing from his head as he withstood a dozen blows. Finally managing to escape his desk, he wobbled down the aisle as Brooks continued to ferociously beat him, shattering his own cane in the process. But that didn't stop him from continuing the assault. "Oh, Lord, oh," Sumner could be heard saying. In total, Brooks would deliver about 30 blows to Sumner. Then, he just walked out of the chamber, leaving Sumner bleeding out on the Senate floor. Sumner would later report that the blows were so severe that he immediately lost his sight.
So everyone else was just standing around watching this man get beaten with a cane?
Yeah, they were stunned.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no one helped until the very end. In some accounts, you will read that Keat and Edmondson, people who came in with Brooks,
right, yeah,
held people off with either a cane or a pistol.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually don't think that's true, because quoting a later resolution to censure the men, which I'll get to at the end, Keat and Edmondson were only accused in the censure resolution of, quote, taking no measures to discourage or prevent the attack, but on the contrary, anticipating the commission of such violence, were present on one or more occasions to witness the same as friends of the assailant.
Okay, sure. Got it.
So I just think that if they had used a cane or a pistol, that would have been mentioned.
Yeah, I agree.
2 representatives from New York helped Sumner into a carriage, blood soaking his clothes by this point, where he was taken to a nearby doctor. Before he fell asleep, which they should not have let him fall asleep.
I know. I'm like, he's scary.
He was reported as saying, "I could not believe such a thing like this was possible."
Yeah, that's because it's crazy. That's a crazy thing to do.
Yeah. This is some House of Representatives behavior in the Senate chamber. It would take Sumner 3 years to recover from this beating. He didn't resume full-time Senate duties until 1859.
Crazy.
Immediately after the attack, Keitt and Sumner were just casually strolling down the street when they were approached by Governor Brown of Mississippi. Quoting his testimony before a Senate Select Committee, after the usual salutations, Mr. Keitt mentioned what had occurred and was proceeding to give some accounts of it when Mr. Brooks interposed with this remark: "The town, I suppose, will be full of rumors in a few hours, and I desire my friends to understand precisely what I have done and why I did it. Regarding this speech as an atrocious libel on South Carolina and a gross insult to my absent relative, I determined, when it was delivered, to punish him for it. Today I approached him, after the Senate adjourned, and said to him, 'Mr. Sumner, I have read your speech carefully, and with as much calmness as I could be expected to read such a speech. You have libeled my state and slandered my relation, who is aged and absent, and I feel it to be my duty to punish you for it.' And with that, I struck him a blow across the head with my cane and repeated it until I was satisfied. No one interposed, and I desisted simply because I had punished him to my satisfaction."
This guy sucks.
This is, obviously a very tragic event that never should have happened. But for a second, can we talk about what Jake Sherman's Twitter would look like if this happened today?
Goodness gracious.
It would be Brooks, in all caps, has entered the chamber. Brooks is talking to Sumner.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine.
And then somehow he would be like, "This, now the government's definitely going to shut down."
Yeah, for sure. What's this due to the majority?
If you don't know who Jake Sherman is, congratulations on having good mental health.
I was like, the rest of us have alerts on for every Jake Sherman tweet.
The day that I get to turn those off will be the day that I find peace.
Yeah, real relief.
Yes. Quoting Senate.gov, overnight, both men became heroes in their respective regions.
Boo.
The caning was front page news across most of the 3,000 of the nation's papers.
I'm sure.
Yeah. The South heralded Brooks as a defender of honor. Southern members even collected broken pieces of his cane from the scene and wore them as necklaces in a show of solidarity with Brooks.
Oh my gosh.
It kind of reminds me of the RNC when people put bandages over their ears in solidarity with Trump. Except Trump was the victim in the situation and Brooks was the perpetrator.
Yeah, these people are sick.
Crazy. Supporters of Brooks would send him fan mail, including canes inscribed with the phrase, "Hit him again."
Y'all are crazy. He literally almost killed a man.
Yeah. I didn't put this in there, but now I'm changing my mind. I was very disappointed because apparently my alma mater, University of Virginia, sent him a replacement gold-topped cane after this.
Really?
So, yeah, very disappointed in UVA for that one.
Do better.
Similarly, the North rallied around Sumner. Even though he was considered a radical, that didn't stop them from standing by their man. He was cast into the martyr role, a man who took a physical beating for the values their states hold dear, and honestly, he deserved it.
Yeah.
Not the beating, but the martyr role.
Yeah, definitely.
He really did take a beating for equality.
Yeah, he took the blows.
The divide between Sumner and Brooks became a metaphor for the deep divide between the North and the South, which, as we all know, would eventually lead to the Civil War. Obviously, this didn't cause the Civil War, but it's an important part of the prelude and shows that the nation was ready to debate the question of slavery with physical violence.
Right. Yeah.
Brooks, for his part, remained unapologetic, insisting that he reacted appropriately and honorably.
Appropriately?
Yeah. That this was just what Sumner had coming for him for his speech. He never apologized.
Again, a speech? Hitting someone 30 times with a cane. A speech? Hitting someone 30 times with a cane. I just I can't rationalize that. Yeah.
No, an appropriate response would have been to do your own speech on the House floor.
Exactly.
That would have been and he had 36 hours between the speech and the caning to like simmer down.
Yeah.
And he chose to simmer
he
up
was
instead.
Just like fired up.
Yeah.
Crazy.
These men. Crazy. Unsurprisingly, there would be a resolution in the House to expel Brooks for this assault.
Right.
The House also moved to censure Keat and Edmondson for the roles they played in assisting in the assault. Keat was successfully censured, and Edmondson's censure resolution actually failed. Shockingly, Brooks survived the motion to expel him, because that needs a 2/3 majority, not a simple majority. And he remained a member of the House of Representatives, for a time at least.
Wow.
Brooks was tried in the district for his attack and was convicted of assault, but he was only fined $300 and never went to jail.
Why?
I
wonder, yeah.
I guess because was a member of the House of Representatives.
I guess.
And so he kind of just got a slap on the wrist, like a fine for beating someone in the head with a cane.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Almost to death. Yeah. Nuts.
It was probably about a $300 cane, too.
For real.
Both Keat and Brooks would actually eventually resign their seats following the attack, but they both won the special elections to fill their own seats and returned to the chamber.
That doesn't surprise me because of the politics.
Yeah.
But still crazy, though.
It surprises me that they ran for their seats. It's like, then why even resign?
Yeah, that does surprise me. I guess just to make a statement and then...
Yeah, I guess the idea was that, like, all right, let's let the people litigate this at the ballot box, whether they think we deserve to be here or not.
Yeah.
But crazy.
Yeah, nuts.
Crazy. However, Brooks wouldn't serve for very long, dying of the croup on January 27th, 1857. So actually just like a few days after they gavelled into the session.
What is croup?
It's like a really bad disease, and that's about all I know. Yeah.
Ooh.
What are the symptoms?
Virus that makes your airways swell. So it's like a barking cough. This is also for like infants, but I'm assuming, yeah. The cough sounds like barking. Ooh. Well, good. Well, good.
Yeah, if anyone deserves the croup, it's Brooks. Sumner, like I mentioned earlier, would return to full-time duties in 1859. He would go on to serve as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and as dean of the United States Senate, a position he held until the end of his life on March 11th, 1874. He died of a heart attack at his home in Washington, D.C.
Well, I'm glad that he had a long, successful career afterwards and that he wasn't like permanently like disabled or anything like that. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah, he went on to like hold leadership posts in the Senate. And if anyone deserves a leadership post in the Senate, I think it's this man. Because even if you disagreed with him, he was principled. And you need that.
Yep, we can disagree, but principle, ethics, all that's very important.
Think about how much history he lived through in the Senate.
Yeah.
Serving from he returned in 1859 and then served until 1874. So this man saw a lot.
The Civil War. Yeah.
And that is the relatively short for Crime in Congress, but completely wild story of the caning of Charles Sumner, with all the sordid details your middle school history class forgot to mention.
Yeah, I totally did not realize that it was a representative caning a senator on the Senate floor. I didn't
realize how brutal the attack was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I knew they got hit, but I kind of thought it was more of like in a mutual exchange of like.
I thought it was more of a brawl. Yeah, I didn't realize it was just of a 30 blow caning with against a defenseless man who was wearing lavender pants.
Yeah.
No,
I also would have assumed that it would happen like in the heat of the moment when the speech was happening.
Not 36 hours later, too. Yeah. Again, like, this is so thought out and premeditated. It's crazy.
It's crazy. And it makes me feel a little bit better about the state of our politics currently. No one is caning.
Yeah, at least we're not caning people nowadays.
Yeah.
There's that.
We're just tweeting.
Yeah.
So with that, Sarah, will you gavel us out?
I sure will.